Hi. It's a beautiful spring day, isn't it? And the sun is peeking through. My name is Hilda Lebedun, and I am an Auschwitz-Birkenau Holocaust survivor. And it's 62 years of my freedom, and it still hurts deep and hard. I am sorry to look at your beautiful young faces, to have to listen to my tragedy which befell the Jewish people and my family. And up to this day, I still don't know why, because under the same God, how can we do such atrocities? Well, I was born and raised in Slovakia, in then Czechoslovakian Republic, and our country was beautiful. We had democracy after World War II, and my family lived not with necessarily Jewish people together. We lived dispersed. The city I came from was a very small Jewish population, and I was the only Jew through all my classes. My father was a government employee. The railroad belonged to the country, to the government, and he was a railroad man, and he took the express train from one part of the long Czechoslovakia to the other. And there were four of us. I had three more siblings. I was the oldest. And when Hitler came to power, and his diabolical to the power annexed Czechoslovakia, just right away, he needed Slovakia to ship his troops against Poland, because that was another country which he annexed right away. And we lived sort of under a very funny pressure with Jews, because there was no newspapers and nothing in those days like we have now. When something happens this minute, the next minute you see it on the tube or you pick up a paper. It was all done very secretly and secretive. And my father was still employed until 1941, when suddenly they put him out of work. And I couldn't go to school anymore. No Jews were allowed. I was a year in the university. I even got a scholarship. And during the summer, I got a big letter. Since I am Jewish, then I cannot attend the university anymore. It was kind of hard situation, not knowing what was going on in the world and in Europe. Sort of through the grapevine, we found out that Hitler occupied France. He tried to occupy Spain, but Franco, that time they said no. And he went against Yugoslavia. Now, of course, they are divided. Yugoslavia is no longer Yugoslavia, but smaller countries. And I am no politician, but I always think it's better when there is a big group than a little piece. And there is still troubles in the former Yugoslavia. We still are not happy to be able to live and let live. When when we had a house. And when this was happening, my father said we better sell the house because they will take it, like we heard. That's what they do in the other occupied countries. So there was a hitch. We had to deposit the money in the bank, and we were allowed to take 50 crowns, that was that time a lot, every month for our livelihood. And we moved to an apartment, and life was kind of hard because we Jews had to wear the Star of David, yellow, not only pinned on the left side of our body, clothing, but had to be sewn on so that we cannot take it off so easily. And we had curfew from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening. That was the only time when we could go on the street out of our apartments or homes. And whoever was caught more than once after 6 o'clock, we were beaten. I was married young, and my husband had a sporting goods store. And the director of the German party in our city was one of his best friends. They used to go skiing together. He saw me a couple times, but he sort of averted his sight from me. And the third time he saw me, he said, now in German, I spoke fluent German, now I don't want to see you on the street anymore. Because if somebody will see me, I get in troubles that I didn't punish you. And that was going on for a couple of years. And Hitler was more successful occupying in Europe, killing all the Polish people, the educated ones, the professors, the doctors, and lots of people from the government who didn't agree with his laws. He took the people and he used them when he took others for slave labor. In 1941, late fall, all the men had to report to the courthouse, among them my husband, to another place. When they got 1,000 in that place, they shipped them where? To Poland. Nobody knew. And in 1942, early March, and it's still winter in Europe, my sister had to go. We never knew that we're going to see her again. My family was small, but I had very loving, beautiful mother and a great father and 2 younger brothers. And I cannot forget them, never. Not only that they murdered them, but how they died. Shortly after my sister was taken and other young women from Slovakia, we were called. And my former teacher, who was in charge of the Slovakian party in our city, called me up and told me, hide someplace. You have a Christian boyfriend, let him hide you in the farm they have in the mountains someplace. And I said, no can do. I cannot leave my parents and my 2 brothers. And I just stayed. And when they were called, I was left out. I didn't get no notice to report. I went up And I said, my parents were called, and I have to be called too. Where we were going? To Poland. We didn't know. We traveled about 100 in cattle wagons, but they were covered, stuffed like sardines, families together. We arrived, we passed by the station, and 2 SS people were with us in the wagon, SS women and 2 SS men with guns, of course, in the front. And one of them cracked the door a little open, and as we were going by, I see Oswiecim. It was not too far from the Slovakian border. We are in Poland, I thought. We finally got to past the station, and we saw SS men with dogs and guns. Heraus, out. And suddenly they say, men, stay in. And I turned around to look at my father, and in that push, I was separated from my mother and my 2 brothers. And that's how I grabbed one of my suitcases, and that's how we marched towards the camp, Auschwitz. And as we were nearing, I saw big, high watchtowers. And as we were coming closer, I see the gun sticking out, machine gun. And it was a murky kind of day. It was drizzling, and the water hitting the high voltage wire barbed fence had a very funny sound. I still remember it. Whenever I see a fence, it just jumps in my subconscious thoughts. That hum of the high voltage barbed wires. As we were nearing closer, dogs barking, children crying, a horrible situation. Everybody was frightened to death and scared. I saw the big gate. Arbeit macht frei, work brings freedom. And they pushed us through the gate towards the middle of the camp, and I noticed they were 2, 3, 4 huge buildings made out of cement blocks in the distance. But first we were put in a room about this big, and I noticed that they had about 3 or 4 more rooms like this. In the middle was a big vessel with foul-smelling water. We had to disrobe. They took our jewelry, if we had any, on our neck or on our hand, and we were split naked. They took us by the hair and dunked us in that foul-smelling water, naked and wet. And then the Jewish prisoners, young men from the men's camp, were shaving us. Everywhere there is hair on the human body. Very degrading, very degrading. And there come our hair off. So there we were, a mass of people, pushed out in the freezing rain in April. It was about the 16th of April, if my memory serves me right. Cold and shivering, roll call. And our roll call was something else. You couldn't be close together to support one another, give warmth to one another. Oh, no. Like I was here where this young man is, and the other person was there with a beautiful red-haired young sweet lady. And that's how we used to stand roll call, standing for hours, split naked, shivering. As we were nearing out of that big room towards our barrack, before we went in, they handed us one coarse striped dress. We were lucky I was lucky I was short, so I got it long. And shoes which were like clodhoppers. The bottom was wood, and the top was burlap, very hard burlap, no shoelaces, no nothing. We were handed a bowl which was about this big, metal, and we were handed a blanket, a generic blanket, not too big. And we were told the shoes, the bowl, and the blanket are the only lifeline we have. And when we got to our barrack, before we went in, there were about 4 vessels with foul-smelling tea. And that's what we got, about this bowl, cup full of tea down in the bowl. And smelling, I couldn't drink it for about 3 years, 3 days. I just couldn't. And when it was raining, we were happy. All throughout the camp, when we were, wherever we were, there was no sanitation, no water. When it was raining, we did like this, and we drank the water. And the rain was kind of our showers. Pretty soon, because of that, we got lice. They are miserable creatures. They were about this long, and they were like candle wax color all over, even in the places where we had no hair. And the person who was in charge of our barrack was a young Polish woman. She was college grad, and they had her, pardon me, working in the ammunition factory, and she skipped 3 times. So the 3rd time when they caught her, they took her to Auschwitz-Birkenau, Auschwitz, to help the SS women and men with us, that they need a lot of help. They had guns on us. We were walking skeleton in 2-3 weeks. We didn't get enough food. We got the bread, which was about this big, which was made out of, later on we found out, out of very small sawdust and bean flour. And we got about this wide and this long piece of sausage. And later on, we salty as heck. No water, and they fed us with salty sausages. Later on, we found out that the sausage was horse meat, which the cavalry, which was on the front, the horses were shot, so they used the meat for us. But in all that situation, that wasn't enough to live, and it was hard to die. On one roll call, we were standing, and one of the women next to me said, "There is somebody waving from that other barrack. To you, probably." I looked in the distance, like from here to my sister. And you know, without hair, one looks kind of funny. The hair's supposed to be a woman's crowning glory, right? They took it off. And after we had to disperse from the roll call, after we got the food, we had to go back to the barrack, and somehow she smuggled herself from the back. "Hilda, how did you come here? Where is mother, father, and our 2 brothers?" I said, "I don't know." And I told her what happened, and I told her, "I'd rather die. I don't want to eat this food." And I remember she gave me on my face, shook me, "Don't you dare to talk like that." Remember when we saw our mother in the camp somehow the last time? What did you promise her? That you're going to remember our God, and you're going to watch for one another, and we have to survive. You're going to promise? You promised our mother you're going to not keep the promise? And that got me sort of thinking, they are not going to take me this way. Not in this condition. I started drinking and eating that sausage. We were there about a month when the head of our block of our place, the young Polish woman, she heard me speak to another person in German, and she came to me and she says, Hilda, you speak German, I can use you. I am going to talk to the SS woman who is in charge of us. Maybe you can become our scribe. Scribe is number person. We just put the number down and we made a check mark every morning. Who is going to work? Check mark in the evening after roll call, who came back to camp after the day's work. The day's work consisted of spreading manure with bare hands in the fields for spring planting. And some of the places were still with snow. And we used the snow to wash our hands from the manure when there was no other way to do it. So I became a scribe. I didn't have to go out to the fields, and I stayed in the barrack. That's the first time I guess God saved me. Because how I survived up to this day after 65 years, I cannot explain in any shape or form why I survived and others died. Stronger, taller than I, who came later than I, and that's the first time it was God's grace for me. We were there in Auschwitz proper about 6 months. In that time, my sister found out through one of the other civilian women who was on her barrack that they gassed the mothers with children who came on my transport. Not in the gas chambers in Birkenau. They had other means to gas people. They had a big bus. They took out the seats and they blocked all the exits and threw a gas bomb in it. Cyclone too. I am not familiar how long it took that time for the person to die. That gas reacts on our lungs and a human chokes to death. After about 6 months, we were told we're going to go to another camp, which was about 15 kilometers or more from Auschwitz proper, by the name of Birkenau. I don't know how much it translates in miles, but we were walking under guard, of course, and dogs. We came to a big clearing on the other side of one side of the other barbed wires. We were surrounded by the high voltage barbed wires forever and ever. Like there was one, this was clear, there was another, and again, a soldier with machine gun. And we were told to disrobe, and that was the first time I saw Dr. Mengele, the famous Dr. Mengele, and we had to parade in front of him split naked, holding that bowl and and the shoes on our feet, which made terrible sores, and the blanket. And he said, you turn around. And it was going right and going left. So we were divided, right or left. And the ones which were on the right side, that means to life. The one on the left to death. And pretty soon when I looked around, I saw big trucks came and they pushed all the people on the left into the trucks and they took off. And when I was looking where they were taking him, in the distance I saw 5 huge chimneys with buildings around there, the crematoria and the gas chambers, 5 of them. That time we didn't know how they're going to use them and what they're going to do, because we couldn't speak to one another. We were not even allowed to sigh or mourn or cry. We were beaten. And we just stood there, and they pushed us towards a huge kind of truck, and they pulled out a pipe with some kind of a gas and put it down us. We walked few steps and we got another set, that beautiful dress. And that's how we marched to Birkenau. And that's why I always see it in the back of my mind. I see the crematoria. When the human flesh is burned, the smoke has a different color. It's kind of like lighter than the gray paint here, billowing like this, not going straight up, but billowing. And in every billow, I always imagine the face of my family and the other faces I saw, which were living where I was there, which got sick and died, or were beaten to death. And we got sick very fast with typhoid fever. There are 3 kinds of typhoid fevers. When one burns in the head, one burns on the body, black blotches. And the worst one was when one has dysentery and one defecates with blood. And up to this day, I always wonder, where did the blood come from? We didn't feed our bodies. I had all 3 kinds, and somehow when I had it, my sister was okay. So each other we were sort of pushing to life. And that time was no selection, because Mengele, in order, it wasn't enough for him that we died or we were killed or brutally beaten to death. But there were more and more transports coming into the camp. Auschwitz became his place where he did experiments on people, on women, and where they were shooting political prisoners. And Birkenau was a camp, a work camp, and it was just too much. And he was building still on the swamps, the commandant Huss. They had men and women working, carrying big rocks and stumps to throw in the swamp from one place to another. It's unexplainable, unimaginable. The deprivation and the degradation. They worked mostly what the body couldn't take anymore. That was due probably to the psychological feeling one has to be so degraded. We had a beautiful name they called us, verdammt Jews, damned curse damn Jews full of lies. One time I opened my mouth and I said to one of the SS person, I said, you know, it's very unbecoming of you as a human to call me that name. We didn't come here with lies. You made us lousy and damned and cursed. He kind of looked at me and he was kind of fingering his gun and he says, you know, I could shoot you. Maybe I could hit you until you are half dead. But he says, I'm not going to do it. You use our language very nicely. Because the people from Poland didn't speak German, they spoke Yiddish. I didn't speak Yiddish because my family didn't use the language. But when they heard Yiddish, and they saw the person on the street or any place when they stopped the person, and when they tried to report to them, we had to report when we approached the SS man. We had to report that prisoner 7290, for instance, my number, request permission to approach. And when he said yes, then we had to state the reason why we are after hours in the camp, after roll call on the street. And when they tried to explain it in Yiddish, they sailed their life. Just they were beaten and beaten and beaten until they died. That was their life in camp. Horrible, 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 horrible. It was, I don't think there are any words in any language to put a name to what we had to go through, and put a name to myself, how I survived. I became a punished prisoner because I voiced during roll call to one woman who used to tell on the others working in the ammunition factory at night. And she told the SS person, you see her? She's sleeping. And they beat her. And I told the woman who was in charge of the barrack, and I told her, Hannah, I cannot stand it anymore. I will address her. She says, you know what they can do? I said, I don't care. And I told her, you know, the Germans like the treason. But they hated the traitor. You know what can happen to you? And she says, I don't care. My stupid Polish mother had to marry a Jew and she wouldn't leave him. I hate her and I hate all of you. The following day, she reported me, and I was called up front to the office, and I was beaten and kicked. And I said, you know what you did to yourself? You're going to suffer before you die, and you are going to Auschwitz, to a dungeon. So what could I say? I didn't cry out, and he kind of looked at me and hit me again and told us, the commandant of our camp, this lousy, stinking, rotten Jew, she didn't cry out, because as he was kicking and hitting me, I remember my mother saying, pray to God, remember our God. You did something right and he will help you. Don't cry, don't cry. And that's how I got the strength. Sure enough, they transported me to Auschwitz and put me in a cell about a little bigger than the straight And it was dripping something on my head, and I couldn't move, just to punish me and make me give in and make me just not being strong. I was called to a room in the morning. I didn't even get that stinking tea. And there were 3 high-ranking SS men sitting on the table in front of me. And there was one standing on the side. And one of them said, "Okay, report." So, with my clear voice, I said the prayer. I reported myself. Häftling 7290 bittet antreten zu dürfen. The German language is very polite. They say bitte und danke a lot. And he says, "Okay, state why you are here." So I said, "I don't really know, but you hold something against me." And he jumps up from the table and comes to me and grabs me. "How did you learn to speak our beautiful language?" So again I said, "May I please explain?" He said, "Jawohl." So I told him our mother had German schools, and she taught us, we learned Slovakian and German. And then later on, Hungarian. My father had Hungarian school because before World War II, before World War I, it was Austria-Hungarian Empire, most of Europe. So they both have different schools. And he said, "Okay, state what you said at the roll call 3 days ago." So I said, "Why do you want to know? You know it. We want to hear it from you." And whack. So I told him, "These are the words I used, and you probably have it written." The German kept explicit journals and papers and everything. And he says, "Yeah, you still believe that's true?" I said, "Yes." And he says, "I see." On the chair, before I was called to the big room, the electrician, he is on the wall over there. The electrician brought in a tube where they put the electric wires in. And in that tube were words from the men's camp. "We heard what happened to you. When you're going to be beaten, don't cry and don't scream if you can do that. And hope when you're going to be beaten by a belt that the buckle is not the one which will hit you." And as he plunked me on the chair, I kind of, from the corner of my eyes, I saw he took his belt off, took the gun off, and I saw the belt was on the other side. I said, "Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Please help me. Please help me." I was praying. He was hitting me on my naked body. I count about 15. I didn't cry out. I just closed my eyes and I was praying to our God. And then he picked me up and flung me against the wall and said to the other troops sitting behind the desk, "This goddamn lousy, rotten devil Jew, a woman, and she doesn't cry. What shall we do with her?" So again, that man who wanted me to repeat what I said came to me, pulled out his gun, put it on my chest, and he says, "You know, I can pull the trigger." And I looked at him, praying to God all the time, and he says, plead for your life. I didn't answer. He says, "Oh yeah?" Still holding the gun against my chest. "I can make you suffer more before I shoot you? Answer me. I said, Jawohl, yes. And he looked at me, and he kicked me. I flew again against the wall. I was down on the floor, and I again said, please, God, let me get up. Please let me get up. I got up and leaned against the wall, and they were talking, all three, and the one who was beating me. And he called the SS woman who was by the door and told her, take this junk out of here. And we were walking down the long hall, and she was from Birkenau, who brought me into Auschwitz. And she said, Hildchen, pet name, you have to go to the bathroom. I said, yes. And she pulled out a wad of paper, and she said, put it in your mouth, between your teeth. You can cry and scream. They won't hear, we are too far away. That, again, only God could do such a thing. I walked back to Birkenau on a roll call that early evening, and my sister's eyes popped out. She never thought she'll see me again. And after roll call, she said, oh my God, Hilda, please, what kind of mess you gonna get yourself into? So I said to her, remember what I promised to Mother? Whenever I can, I will help. And at that moment, I was thinking, she doesn't know what's out there. But I said, I promise, and I'm keeping my promise, and God is with me. But raise up my dress and see how my behind looks. She looked very red, very swollen, but no laceration. Another thing, I give my thanks to God. I should have had broken skin, but I didn't. It was hurting, and luckily there were no selections again. I was put back to Birkenau in a place next to the sick bay, and I was told I will have to help in the sick bay. And that's where I was until one day, I think it was 2.5 years, no, 2 years I was in Birkenau. How I was there 2 years, only God knows. About 4 German high-ranking people came to camp to take 100 prisoners from the women's camp, preferably the newcomers, with them to work in the ammunition factory in Upper Silesia, which is above on the border of the North Sea between Germany and Poland, the uppermost tip. And the scribe in that camp in Birkenau was a friend of mine. She was from the same country. And she sent a note to me. You cannot get through the gate. I had Red Cross here and in the back, punished prisoner. You have to get somehow a jacket or something to come through the gate, so you are in the group where he's going to pick from. And it's good to know people in high places sometimes where they were working in that barrack where the clothing came, which they kept for us, the bad ones and the good ones they shipped to Germany. And one of them brought a jacket for me. Luckily, it had one button, so I buttoned it. And somehow I got through the gate. And the other 4 of us, which were kept together, and there were about 200 of us there. and he was picking one of them. I looked at his face and I was thinking, he has kind of kind face. And I don't know, I lost count how many they were. And suddenly Katie said to him, how about from that corner? And he looked around and he said to me, you. So I walked up for front and I started to say, prisoner 7290. He says, I don't need that. Okay, I want her. And he told Katie, get her number. And in that moment, the commandant of our camp, a woman, ugly face worse than a monkey's, with sticking out teeth like a rabbit, tall, had 2 guns in both sides of her boots. And she was mean and ugly. I guess God turned his face from her away. And she says, that person cannot go. She's a punished prisoner. And he looked at her, that kind man, which I thought kind. I want her because I say what goes right now. I have the power over you, over your commandant, over anybody here in uniform. I want her tomorrow morning in the first row. And in that melee, my sister and the other 3 girls went through. And that's how we stood. They put us in a special barrack by the office. And Katie came and she said, Hilda, under no circumstances show your face out of this barrack because she's gunning for you. She'll shoot you. So the following morning, when I was in the first row, and he was looking, and he says, report numbers. So I reported, prisoner 7290, present. And he says, good German. Why? How? So again I told him. And that's how we got up to Upper Silesia, working in an ammunition factory, a special kind. They were making and testing the bombs which they used against England. It was about this long and this wide. It had 2 very expensive kind of things around the middle. And we were checking it with an electrical device. And we were told to be very careful not to come too close to the bend because we will make the bomb useless. And I was there about a week, and one of the person who was helping the Germans in the factory was a Ukrainian nun. And she came to me, we couldn't talk to one another, but from the back she said, you know, I think I can trust you. I heard over the grapevine that you are a punished prisoner, and I want you to sabotage the heart of the bomb. And I said, why? So they can torture me? No, we tell you how and why. And that's what I was doing. We were watched. We were very much watched. And then luckily, to me, we had to flee. And on that marches and being shot through Germany, we wound up in Westphalia and by Hamburg. And we were, over the grapevine, we were told it's going very bad for the Germans. They are losing the war. We should keep up our lives, and we should not lose hope. And one night, they were bombing the camp where we were in. They killed some SS men. They make huge holes in between the office and between the camp. And we were we had to leave, and we were told we're going to be free. And I said we were different. They were different soldiers guarding us. They were home security soldiers, which were hurt in the war. Some of them didn't have a piece of arm or hand or leg. They were guarding us, and one of them said, "You're going to be free. You're going to Denmark." And that's how we wound up in Denmark. And the people in Denmark were so nice to us. But they pushed us up to Sweden, because Sweden was without the war for several decades. And they were very good to us. They tried to heal us physically and emotionally. And I was living in Sweden not quite 2 years. My cousin, who was living in Mexico at that time, and my other cousin, who was saved and came back to Czechoslovakia, she sent a telegram: under no circumstances you should go back to Czechoslovakia. So that's how we came to this country. My aunt and my uncle vouched for us. We arrived in New York, and when we reached the harbor, we saw the lady, the Statue of Liberty. Couldn't believe that this was possible. We kind of looked at each other. We had got different clothes, and we were clean and fed, but I couldn't help from crying and praying to God, "Thank you for saving my life." And what I want to tell you, never lose hope. Honor and love one another, because then you have the capacity to love somebody else. Love and honor your parents, and honor your teachers, because they are trying to show you the way to life. And please don't hate. Hate is a very destructive force, and it's still happening now. Somehow we cannot learn to be nice to one another. And since you are so young, you have in your power to maybe change the thinking and the action against hate. I thank you for listening to me. The beautiful grandma, so many things. And I visited her very often. Anytime I get off from school a day, early in the morning I hopped on the train. I was there all day. And didn't cost me any money, because my father was a government employee. And we had very good relationship with my parents. I was taught love of God. I was told to honor people, and I was taught not to hate. My mother used to say, "You didn't have such a good day today." I said, "No, remember, tomorrow will be better." Never lose a hope, and never lose your faith in God.
So growing up, tell me about your childhood.
Oh, well, I was the oldest, and for a while my mother had, I hate to use a maid, but she had help to do laundry and to clean the house. But my aunt, who had no children, she told her, "What a shame. How are you raising your children, your daughters? They have to know what work is." And I used to say, "Aunt Regina, I'm going to have a maid." She looked at me. I was knee-high to the grasshopper. And she says, "Okay, may God listen to you, but how are you going to tell the maid what to do when you don't know how to do it yourself?" And she was told, my mother was told, they have to learn to do everything. Okay, they are too young to go and scrub the floors or the laundry. You know, the laundry was on the board, and we had a beautiful kind of stream behind our property. We used to rinse our clothes there. And every morning when I got up, I ran down to the there and washed my face. And I love the cold water, even up to sometimes end of September, beginning of October, because the thing is different in Europe. The winters are winters, summers are summers, etc. And we didn't have all the humidity I encountered in this country, mostly in St. Louis. That was a wake-up call to me. I was dripping like this for a good couple years when I came to St. Louis.
Well, tell me about your brothers and your sisters.
My older brother, he was the older of the two boys. He was younger than I. And he was very sweet. He sort of resembled me. He had light eyes and lighter hair. I didn't have jet black hair. My mother has sort of reddish highlight in her hair and not very curly. And he was just very sweet. He loved to play soccer and he hated school. Yeah, my mother said, get your brother someplace and help him. He looked at me and he says, do you want me to love you? Just tell Mom you explained it to me, and that's it. I said, but don't flunk, because then I am going to be in troubles. But he was sweet and loving, and he just, before they took us, 3 years before, he had bar mitzvah. But it was not such a pomp like we have here. It was a religious observance. And my youngest sibling, a boy, my brother, he was just the opposite. He had jet black hair like my father. He had dark black eyes, and his hair was just like poker straight. Sweet, beautiful, loved me. And he was good in school, loved school. Whenever I said to him, need any help, he looked at me. Hilda, thanks, but no thanks. I am going to grow up, he said, and I am going to be engineer. I said, oh yeah, what kind of engineer? The very famous one, I'm going to build things. I said, oh, I see. Oh, it was, and my sister, I am not going to scrub floors. Mother, I am not going to help you. I'm going to have a maid. You have a good maid on Hilda. Because she knew I did it. And my mother relied on me. And the four of us, we loved our parents. And the four of us, we somehow stuck together. Because we all had, there were no Jewish friends. We had friends from the population. And my brother got a new pair of shoes, and he came one time, and the front was all torn up from soccer. And for many years, I couldn't understand baseball here. I don't understand where they're running. They show signs to them. My husband and my sons, my children, tried to teach me. I said, that's too much for me. If we win, we win. Hallelujah, but that's it.
Did you think it was strange that, did you think about not having other Jewish friends?
No, it was just par for course with me. Because I was told you honor the religion of your friends, and hopefully they honor yours.
And so when did you start to feel that the things were different?
The things were different when we couldn't communicate with one another, when we had to start wearing the Jewish star and we were ostracized from the other people. And it was, we were unable to get together because nobody wanted to see with the Jew, with the Jewish star, communicate with. That's when it started.
How old were you?
I was, let's see, how was I? I was 17 and a half. That was shortly, even before, but shortly after. Then when we had to use the Jewish star, I was, for that year before, I was in our capital city in the university, away from home. And there was the same thing. No much Jewish connection, but connection with people. I love people and I say hi to everybody. If I answer. If they don't, I try again. And when I was told I'm going to get a scholarship for the second year in the university, in the summer I got a letter. I am Jewish and no Jews are allowed to go to school in any kind of school. That's why it hit me and how it hit me. Or my friends passed me notes when we sort of saw one another on the street, but they didn't see us talking. And we pray for you. The first year of high school, I was with the Catholic girls. And Monsignor said, our Savior is a Jew. Come on in and listen to this religion. So I knew Catholicism. And the second year I was put with the Lutheran girls. And the Lutheran minister was my best friend. So I learned Lutheran religion. I knew much more about those two religions than I knew mine. How I learned the history of our people when I came to this country and my oldest son went to Sheremet to Sunday school and he brought books home. And by the time I read pretty good English and I didn't speak before a word of English, and that's how I learned the history of our people, by the books my children brought from Sunday school.
Yeah. So what did your parents?
Okay,
so
whatever you're
okay. So I was
That's-
saying, what did your parents? Did you go home from the university then? And what did
Yep,
they say?
I stayed at home. I met a nice person and we married. He had a sporting goods store and we had no children, thank God. Otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here and talking to you. And things started brewing in Czechoslovakia. And we heard through the grapevine that Hitler came to power, annexed Austria. There was Kristallnacht in Germany, which we didn't know about it. We had no media and very few newspapers. My father used to go sort of during the day to the back of the factory, the place where he used to take the trains from, and he was able to communicate with the people who worked underneath him, sometimes friends, and he brought news home to us that Europe is in an upheaval. Hitler is crazy, he is annexing everything, he went against Poland, killed all the educated people, the professors, and the doctors, and everybody and anybody politically disinclined with his teachings. And it wasn't enough to know, because whatever they did, I mean the German government under Hitler, it was so harsh, and it wasn't much advertised in the one newspaper, and not everybody could buy it and have it, and no media. Jews were not allowed to have radios, and there were not many radios available. One time my father, before he was pensioned off, had a layover in Prague, and he brought a radio in pieces. He was very handy to put together. He also brought a gramophone, the one with the tube, his master's voice, which had to be wound up, and he brought beautiful records. That's the love I have for classical music. And it was in our house in the long hallway from which they went to the bedrooms. And if he was gone lots of times, nights and days, and when he got a good report that we were good children and we minded our mother, so before we went to sleep, he put the machine and we had music. It was, all the things are so jumbled in my subconscious mind. But I am grateful to God that the nights are not so hard, and I have no nightmares as much. Like when we had the yesterday, the memorial service, those kind of are hard on me. Brings back memories. I somehow think of all the tragedy I lived through, like a huge hole covered up with a very thin layer. And sometimes it opens up a little bit and it comes back in pretty great force. And through the years, I thank God I learned to cope with it a little better. It's inside of me, but the coping mechanism, the self-hypnosis helps me to function a little better. And I started writing poetry when my English became a little better. And that helps to bring my thoughts on paper. It's just bittersweet when I go back to the memories. One has to talk about it because we are the last people from our generation to be able to express as much as we can with the words as they can express and make people understand what the human does to another human. I am not saying that it should never happen again, because it's happening again in Darfur, in Sahel, in Far East, in Europe, in South America. We humans are very funny people. Sometimes I think that we have a God with a good humor. He looks down and he thinks, I gave those humans a brain and they don't want to use it.
Boy, I agree with you there. When did you start talking, Hilda?
Not right away. My husband said, you have to learn to live with yourself and us. He wasn't in camps. He came to this country in 1938, and he was with the United States Army in Egypt against Rommel El Alamein. he was working on the sites in tanks, anti-aircraft sites. And so he wasn't on the front in the war, but his brother was. His younger brother, who also came to this country a year later than my husband, he was taken prisoner of war in the Battle of the Bulge. So he saw the war. It's just unbelievable how we still continue to hate when that's the force which brings all the misery.
Which is why it's good that you talk to the children. Tell me why you do this.
I had many fights with my husband. I got to go and speak. First, Sister Prince heard me speak with somebody at one of the Holocaust get-togethers, and she approached me and she said, Hilda, you have vast knowledge and you are able to express yourself. Your English is getting so good, you gotta start talking. And I looked at her and I said, Sister, I opened my wounds. And she said, well, you were told from home, we talked, that one has to learn to understand one another and to express one's feelings. And you can do that. And you sort of had to. And when she called me that she's going to interview me, my husband says, absolutely no. But about 2 months later, another lady called me and I said, Poplin, that was my pet name for him. Even if you're going to bring heaven and hell together, I am going to. Pardon me, and I am my own person. I love you and you don't own me, and I gotta talk. And when I came back, he kind of looked at me. I worked that time at Famous Bar, and I used my day off to talk. When Rabbi Sternkopf was the director of the Holocaust Center, he picked me up and we went all over to Illinois and in Missouri. I was the speaker. And when I came back, my husband looked at me and he says, there are tears in your eyes. I said, no, but they were. And I said, okay, Poplin, you and I are incognito right now. I need time for myself. And I picked up and walked. There was a park too nearby, and I sat on the bench, on the swing, and I needed sort of debriefing. And that was my debriefing.
Right, because it's very hard to talk.
Yes, very hard to talk, especially my English I learned to speak, but I don't have the basic. And I didn't learn English from the grammar up. And that's kind of hard. I tried to learn it a little better because it was somehow stopping me when I was doing poetry. But then I said, oh, what the heck? So I misspelled. But when my children went to school and I needed off and on to send a note to the teacher, every time on the bottom I put P.S. Please forgive my spelling.
Right, but it's also hard emotionally for you to recall. So when you speak with the children, is it a cathartic thing? Does it help you?
Yes and no. Because, pardon me, while I speak, and I saw it all happening all over again.
Start again. Start. Take a drink. Do you need some water? Is that okay?
To our health.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me about when you speak.
Then I I think sometime of the pain and the tears, but the feeling that I have to make them understand a little bit of the tragedy I went through. But afterwards, when I leave here, I take a long walk, debriefing, and pardon me. And the garden we just have, the new one, I am going to use. I can sit down and look at the flowers. Because unfortunately, I live at the Covenant House, but we have no flowers.
So what do you want the children to come away with?
To try to understand.
Tell me, I want the children.
I want the children to try to understand that the difference can keep us together, that the basics of our humaneness is the same, what they are, how they are raised, and what they see from outside world should not be against their own feelings sometimes. To believe in the religion, to believe in God, and for them is Jesus, and to never lose hope, and to start thinking that we are all humans and we can be humane under the same God.
I know that a young girl came up and thanked you. How does that feel?
That felt I reached somebody. But when I looked at their faces and I looked at the eyes, they didn't have to come and say anything. I saw it in their eyes that they tried to digest what I was saying in words.
What about with your own family, with your children?
I did not talk about my tragedy to my children for a long time. When they came to questions, you know, everybody has an aunt and uncle. Our only aunt lives in New York. Our only uncle is our father's brother. What happened to the other family? And they have grandmothers and grandfathers. I said, well, you knew I came from a different country, and there was a war, which is a bad thing in Europe, and bad things happen to Jewish people. When you're going to be older, and I will feel you understand a little better my life before I had you, then we will talk.
Having the number on your arm, tell me about that.
The number on my arm, I was asked many times, what's the number on your arm? Who put it down there? And how was it done? So I explained. And my neighbors knew that my religion is Jewish, but they also felt I honored theirs. And when they looked at it the first time, oh, that's a shame. Can't you have it removed? Because doesn't it remind you what you went through? And when I started working at Famous Bar, a very lovely older lady said, my son is a famous doctor, and he can take it out, what you call the doctor who does. And he won't charge you anything. And I said, thank you very much. This is not my shame. This is the shame of the perpetrator. And this, the world has to see what happened. The degradation of a human from a human.
How did you survive?
How did I survive? That I promised my mother when I saw her the last time. Somehow I got to the barrack where they were. It's a long story. And when she looked at me, mein Kind, my child, when she said, Hilda, I knew I displeased her, but mein Kind was her name for us children, the closeness she felt, the love. Mein Kind, no hair. And my two brothers started crying, and I hugged them, don't cry. Eugene and Irvin, don't cry. And my mother said, mein Kind, whatever is out there, promise me, whatever, whenever you can help, do that. Promise me, because God will be with you. Never, never forget our God. Pray to Him when you see horrible things out there, because she didn't see what's out there. And thank Him when day is done. He will help you. Promise me. In that split second I was thinking, oh God, what's out there? And she said again, my child, did you hear what I asked you? I said, yes, Mother, I promised. Couple times it was hard to keep the promise. When I was so sick and I want to give up, and my sister, who was that time not sick, somehow by God's grace I survived. Because when there were big selections, I wasn't sick. And somehow, no matter how skinny I was, how sunken my eyes were in my face, I have good upper legs. And somehow that didn't shrink so much. I always said to my mother, you know, I am kind of heavy here. She says, someday you're not going to be so angry about your heavy thighs. And one time when we had selection, that came true. Because Mengele, when I came to him, my sister said, when he'll take you, I go with you. Because I want to go first. I said, okay, so what's the difference? When he take you, I go with you too. So I went first, and I reported again, and he says, turn around, split naked, emaciated, dirty, and stinky. And he says, good German, get going to the right. And in that questioning, my sister got to the right. I think by the grace of God, all through my stay in Birkenau, on death marches, and everywhere, when in life, I was in a very bad car accident, not through the fault of my husband. I could have been paralyzed from the waist down, and I am not. I guess God had some purpose for me, because we were not rich, but my husband made a living, and I went to work to supplement our income. But we loved each other, oh, so much. And he loved me, it's beyond words. And I loved him, and when I lost him 4 years ago, I still miss him. He was 94 and a half when he died. And by the grace of God, his heart just gave out. And by the grace of God, we were married 54 and a piece a year. That's more than a half a century.
That's wonderful.
Yep. And my children are just great. My oldest son is a PhD in sociology. My daughter is a tech in a hospital for many years. She takes EKGs and EEGs, brainwave. And my youngest son has a master's degree in social work from WashU. They are all in service. They all have a good soft heart, like me and their father. Think of their fellow man.
And how do you think that you're not bitter?
Because there I go again to hate. Many moons ago, when I was no higher than the grass, a little higher than the grasshopper, I was taught that hate is a destructive force. But there is another side to hate. When one hates, the hate doesn't project to the other person. It stays in you and it poisons your mind and thoughts and your life. So why should I do that to myself? It's later on I read a lot and I listen to many of the researchers laid on the tube, and it comes to the understanding for me. The basic of our life, the human being I am, is not much different from another human being. There comes a different culture in between, but by understanding that other culture to them is our other culture, we learn to tolerance of one another, not just by living, but also in religion. And if you believe so strongly in your religion, and thank God He gave us a piece of brain, one cannot just succumb to hate when one sees what hate can do. Forgiveness.
I wanna go back to you were married, your husband had the store, and you said there was curfew, rights started being taken away. So tell me what that time period was like.
We were ordered to wear the Star of David, big yellow Jewish star, sewn on the left side of.
Let's start over again because she's hitting the microphone.
Okay.
Oops.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll start over.
We were ordered, Hilda, keep your hands underneath your feet. Dogs. We were ordered to wear a yellow Jewish star sewn on the left side on our by our shoulder. We were given curfew from 8 to 6 during the day. We didn't have much to do in the town, in the city, because we had the movie was not in our city, and we had no radios and no nothing. But many moons ago, when my father was still working, and he had layover in Prague, in the capital city of Czechoslovakia, he brought with him back a radio in pieces. He was very handy to put together. And he also brought a music box, the gramophone with the big tube you have to wind up, brought records, and that we listened to quietly, not too loud, so the neighbor shouldn't hear. And that's how I learned the love of music, classical music.
That's great. And when you went out in the street, who was it? You said someone told you not to walk out in the street, warned you not to.
Well, we didn't feel safe, number one. We didn't feel that we somehow don't belong anymore, no place, except in our own homes or apartments. We were restricted to many things, and that was going on.
So did you think that you needed to get out of the country?
There was no place to go. All the borders were closed, and you can have no place to go. If you had a chance, for instance, to go to Poland, we couldn't go because it was bad there. To Austria, we couldn't go because the border was closed. For a while, Hungary wasn't closed the border too much, but it's very hard to defect for a family. 1-2 people can do that, but a family, no. We had a cousin who lived in Budapest, the capital city of Hungary, but I didn't want to go by myself or with my sister or whatever. So we stayed together. We felt as long as the family stayed together, it's okay. You see, we were the first country which were so badly restricted, especially Slovakia, because he needed Slovakia for the transportation of his troops towards Poland, towards Russia. And the city where I grew up and was living in was a hub, a railroad hub, and there was no place to go. And the safety was with our families. And because we were the first ones so restricted, and anyway, the German government, whomever they went in and annexed to Germany, they were restricted also not to talk. They had very strict propaganda. There were very few newspapers, and not everybody could afford them. And there was no way to let the people know what's going on.
So when they came to get your father,
my husband first. They didn't come, they just sent a notice. On this day, at this hour, with 2 suitcases, special size, with 1 for non-perishable food and 1 with the best clothes we can put in, and report to the courthouse. And that's what all the younger men got. And there were, I think, 10 men with my husband from our town. The Jewish population was very small, and they were mostly older people. And the place where they were sort of put together, 1,000, and then they put them in cattle wagons, closed cattle wagons, 100 to 1 wagon, like sardines, towards Poland, and we never knew where. There was no knowledge of anybody. We had no reporters, no nothing.
when did you find out what happened to your husband?
Oh my God, I was in the camp already over a year when I really found out that he's no longer alive. That he was working in a special unit, the ones which got the clothes from the newcomers, and 2 of the high-ranking German officers and about 3 of the Jewish prisoners were trying to defect, to flee the camp. And as with all the preparations with anything, one always finds a traitor for whatever reason. There is always a Benedict Arnold everywhere. And somebody betrayed them, and they were shot with the officers. I don't know if they were first tortured, but I know that they were shot. And the person who is on the picture in that room, the electrician, he found out for me.
And then tell me about how the rest of you got.
Well, then my sister was taken. And we didn't know if we will see her again and again. No place, we didn't know where. And about 3 months later, my parents got a notice, not me.
Why do you think you didn't get one?
I wasn't included because the director, who was my former director of high school, he didn't put my name on. And the one who was in charge of the German government, he was a best friend of my husband. They used to go skiing together. Before they took this, they stole away from my husband. All the Jewish things were stolen from them. And somehow they just left me out. So I picked myself up and I walked to the middle of the city where the high school was. And I said to my former principal, I cannot stay behind. Where are my parents and my two brothers going? And he says to me, you know, you were my star pupil and you have a Christian boyfriend. And I know his parents have a farm not too far from in the town where your grandmother lives. Let them somehow save you on the farm in the mountains. I looked at him and I said, why? Where are they sending us? He says, that's all I can tell you. I said, well, just put me on the list. I am not leaving my parents and my brothers. He hugged me and he says, you sure you want me to do that? I said, yes.
Wow. He could have saved, I mean, he really did want to save you.
But he couldn't tell me. I started writing poetry there, and he requested a couple of the poems when we had national holidays. He always said, Hilda, I want a poem about that person. And he says, I never saved them, you still have them, I want them. So I gave it to him.
You talked a couple times about speaking up and speaking out. Where do you think you got the gumption to do that?
Again, the feeling I have for righteousness and the promise I made for my mother and the promise I made myself, experiencing the power of God, that He saved me so many times. That's why I continued. Whatever is out there, that's what I did. And whatever out there, somehow He saved me.
And what's interesting is really another thing. I mean, everyone says it's luck, it's this, it's that, who knows? But
yes,
you're German.
Yes, that I spoke fluent German, and that well, why did I survive even with my luck? Who gave me that luck? God. He gave me the strength to keep on going and never lose hope.
Did you speak in Slovakia? Is that what you spoke, was German?
Yes, we spoke Slovakian and German, and my mother had German schools and Austria-Hungarian Empire that time. My father came from a different part of the Slovakia, and that was still under Hungary more. He spoke Hungarian, and that was the secret language with our parents, Hungarian, until one day I heard my mother tell my father, I better teach Hungarian to the children, to the girls, we were older, because they understand we lost our secret language. So we learned to speak Hungarian. I was pretty good in Hungarian. I kind of have good, how you call it, for languages. And my youngest son is that way. When he was promoted to the 4th grade, he was studying French. And the teacher told me he has such good pronunciation in French. He has my gift of learning languages. I didn't speak a word of English, but I spoke German. In Sweden, where I lived almost 2 years, I pretty soon learned to speak Swedish and make myself understood. And English is an Anglo-Saxon origin. And in New York, when I went to work every morning in the subway, by the subway was a newsstand. And for a nickel, I got the cheapest newspaper, the Daily News, and started reading it, holding with one hand. And my sister said, "Don't be an idiot. You don't understand what you're reading." And I said, "Well, I am reading." And pretty soon, I started understanding a little bit. But living in New York, you have all the people from your country. We didn't speak much English. I came to St. Louis. That was an awakening when I got lost in St. Louis.
Yeah, okay. Tell me about liberation.
About liberation.
Where were you at the time? How did that happen?
The liberation came when we were in the last camp, Hamburg, and that's a big city on the North Sea, port city. And that time we were after all the death marches. God in heaven, how we wound up from here to there, distance throughout Germany, death marches. Hearing the guns go off when somebody could make another step and fell to the ground. Being once on a big clearing with machine guns around, that we're gonna be all machine gunned down. And we were there, I think, not even 2 months, no, not quite a month and a half. And again, I was kept as a scribe. And the girls were working in building ditches, anti-tank ditches. I don't know why, just to kill us, just to get less and less people. And we heard over the grapevine the war is going very bad for the Germans, and that we called the Russians Russians on that side. But from the other side, from the west, we called the Americans and the English Tommies. That the Tommies were in Berlin, and the Russians were there first, and that we're going to be free. They are trying to work to free us. During the war, we heard over the grapevine, Goering's second wife was a Swedish countess. And she tried to, through the Swedish Red Cross, to liberate the Nordic political prisoners. And she tried also towards the end to liberate some Jews from the camps which were alive. But she didn't get permission on that because there was nobody anymore with money to give. They wanted too much money. And somehow, for some reason, the American Jews didn't come forward either. Whatever, I'm not a politician. And when we were bombed in Hamburg, and there was a huge hole in between the camp and where the officers were in the quarters of the SS. That morning when we heard the bombs falling down overnight, we were praying, please God, send one to us. We are hungry and dirty and at the end of our rope. No facilities, not even water. And the commandant came and he was spared, but there were several SS killed. Not our camp, but later on we heard that the men's camp, they by accident somehow they threw the bomb and exploded. And there was also a POW camp, and some hit them too, So they trying to evacuate them, the POWs and the political prisoners, and that we're going to be freed. And they come and then they had to go all around, and they had to somehow open the barbed wire for him to get to the camp. And he said, first, he said to me, go to the kitchen and get the tea going. The stinking generic tea. And he said, wind up everybody. You don't have to put no numbers right now. The numbers I want you to start writing is by nationality. And I kind of looked at him and I said, Herr Obersturmführer is full. And he looked at me and he says, you know, you're asking too many questions. Just do what I ordered you to do. And with the gun, on the double. By the time I came back from the long walk from the kitchen, I see there is other soldiers in the camp, not in only, but around. And through the barbed wire, one of them called to me, and he says, hey, you. And of course I answered in German, and he says, you're going to be free. You're going to Denmark. And I said to him, you know, you're talking to a very old prisoner. I am from Auschwitz-Birkenau. Oh, he said, but yes, you're going to be free. And catch. He pulled out of his pocket and broke a piece of white bread and threw it over the wire. And I said, what's that for? Reach for it, that's for you. He made sure that there was sort of like a space between the wires that went over. I said, you telling me I am going to be free and you want to poison me? Oh, no, this is a piece from my ration. And I am not the SS. You see the different uniform? I am Wehrmacht. I am a home security. I said, oh, seeing is believing, and I ran into the barrack, and the first in command was a German woman, not a Jew, and the second in command was a girl from Belgium. And I said, Nelly, that person there by the barbed wire is a different uniform, and he just told me to get tea from the kitchen and to go from barrack to barrack and write by nationalities the numbers and the names. Something is going on. And that's when I took my pencil and paper and went from barrack to barrack. Hurry up, he came, hurry up. And the loudspeaker wasn't working anymore, so he went from roll call to roll call, and get yourself to the nationality, get to the nationality. And we from Slovakia, we were a handful. We were the first and we were the most few survivors. And after we got that delicious tea, we were told we're going to walk out on the other side where the barbed wire was opened for the commandant of the camp, and we saw he was not there anymore. But he was sort of under guard. All the SS which were there before were under guard with the home security. And we were taken to away from the train station. And nationalities. So we were put a few Slovakian girls with the Hungarian girls and some of the Austrian girls, 50 of us. And we saw there are 3 big balls, or whatever you call it, of straw. And we stopped at the big door of the train, and again, cattle wagons, but we were told, wait a minute. And I said, you want us to put the straw inside? And he looked at me and he said, nope, we'll do it. And the three of them, one was older one, and his arm was gone. And the middle one, the shorter one, his leg was sort of half gone. They used the home security of the soldiers which were hurt in the war, and they were put to service inside the country. And the two of the balls were going in, bundles, and one they left out, and he says, okay, step on it and go in. Step on it. Before, by hook or crook, we have to go in. So we get in, and he said, you are the scribe? I said, yes, sir. And he says, okay, every time the person comes in, put a mark against the name and the nationality. And that's how we got to the wagon. And that's when we were told we're going to Denmark. And I said, sure, it's April. Denmark is occupied by the Germans for slave labor in the fields. No, you're gonna be free. And I said, oh, I see. And we crossed the border.
You're telling me what a shock it was that, oh my gosh, you really were free. So.
Yes, we were free. We were taken from Denmark. They apologized. The Danish Red Cross took us over. And they had barracks with bunk beds too. Like it's used now for families in which they have more children. And we had white paper sheets, and the ladies from the Danish Red Cross all night long, there were about 20 of us in that room. Are you okay? You have a headache, you need an aspirin, because they bade us to delouse us, etc. And they said they cannot keep us in Denmark because Hitler just took everything from Danes.
What was the time? What year was this? Do you remember the day?
The day exactly, I don't remember, but it was April, towards the end of April. I think it was the second part of April. That's why we have Yom HaShoah in the second part of April. Yeah, in 45. Probably.
She's got her hand on the
Okay.
Probably.
Let's start over again.
Okay, I was liberated in April.
In April, probably the dates I try to obliterate, or whatever it obliterated in my brain, to save my soul, So whenever we can come to the date, even if it wasn't the same month, it came back. And the nights with dreams and screamings we had. And my poor husband used to wake me up and hug me. And I said, please, if you love me, don't wake me up. Just let me scream it out. Because for some reason, after I screamed it out, I went back to sleep. But when he woke me up, loving and everything, kissing, I couldn't go back to sleep. It's something, it's a puzzlement to me, but that's what happened to me. And when we went from Denmark to Sweden, the Swedish Red Cross accepted us, and we went in a beautiful, beautiful luxury boat to Sweden. I remember like it would happen yesterday. The waiters, we all dressed up with the serviette over their arm. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And, pardon me. That's the sickness I had a month ago. And I said to the captain, he welcomed us. I am the captain of this ship, and we welcome you, and we praise our Lord to keep you alive, and we'll take care of you. And I said, sir, we are so lousy and stinky and dirty. Doesn't matter. You are welcome, doesn't matter. And after we had delicious food, we were told, we can have all we want, not to eat too much, because our stomachs were so starved and shrunken. And whoever didn't listen to it were sick. And we crossed the border, and that was a Swedish town. The Swedish Red Cross welcomed us, and that night it was just, we are free, really. And in the morning, I was told to take the list from my barrack with the names and nationalities and go report to the office, which was a little distant from the barracks, which they had for us. And as I was nearing, there was a big porch, and I went up the steps and I looked to the right. I see it coming, 30 white caskets with bodies. And all the ladies, the women and the men with tears in their eyes stood by. And I noticed a Lutheran priest was praying. And I said, what happened? And she, in German, and she spoke kind of broken German. She said, it's a great tragedy that after you got free, their souls departed from their bodies. 30 of them, white caskets. They put us in, fed us good breakfast. Again, when we watched what we ate, we didn't get sick. And they put us in an express train, a normal train, and they told us we're going deeper in Sweden to the town called Bredarid, and that they're gonna be our hosts, and we're gonna try to heal you physically and emotionally, and we welcome you to our country, which we're gonna extend our friendship to you. And that's what they did.
When did you realize that your sister had died? When was the last time you saw your sister?
No, my sister didn't die.
Your sister made it with you?
Oh yeah, my sister made it.
Was she with you through Denmark and everything? Okay.
Another gift from God.
Absolutely.
I was lighter. I didn't have jet black hair. And when you don't have hair, just stubs, and you don't look like one egg to another, that's how we were able to survive in the camps. She had a different number, 4123, came on a different transport. We kept it a secret. We didn't even tell nobody except the other 3 which were in our group. Because we humans, when we got that piece of bread, all of us, crumbly, we always managed to save one. Guarded in our sleep, we were lying on it. Each one had a different night, so that shouldn't be stolen. And when one has a little crumb or 2 in one's mouth, being starved, one has a feeling we are being fed. We are eating. So after, this is also a byway when I come to a human nature. We were traveling to that town, Bredarid. They emptied the public school for us. We had cots, and we had a huge radio. And we were listening, sitting around, listening. The Swiss Red Cross started to get lists looking for people, families who were saved. Little by little we heard other transports came to Sweden, and some of the transports mostly went back to Germany. They had DP camps for them and to house them and try to heal them. And we were sitting glued to that radio to hear if somebody from our family was left. Somebody was looking for us. And we knew that our cousin was looking for us because in the meantime, she got a list from the Swedish Red Cross somehow. She was in Prague. Her husband was on the Russian front, but they survived. And she survived on false papers in Hungary. That under no circumstances we should repatriate to Czechoslovakia. That she will get in touch with her sister, who was that time in Mexico. That we have to get help not to get back to Czechoslovakia. Unfortunately, we learned that the border was closed to Mexico, and again, Jews had no place to go. Border was closed to the USA. So the other people which survived the misery of the camps were housed in Germany, in the DP camps, and I get again, God helped me to live in a beautiful country. And God helped me to get visa to come to America finally. My aunt and uncle had to deposit money that at no time we will come to the need to be supported by the government. So we had to go to work right away. And we were free. We were free. And that feeling that we belong again to the human race, especially that America took us in, the USA took us in, and that the other places were still negotiating how many Jews they can take out of the DP camps, and how many people, family in the other countries were negotiating to get the person or two people from their family to come to their country. So we were very lucky to get to freedom in the United States.
And tell me what it meant to you that you went through this with your sister.
It meant not only the life, but the quality of life, to be able to survive. Because I knew that there is somebody first in the other barrack, then the same barrack, and then another in the barrack. When I was punished, I was put someplace else. That there is another person who gives a damn if I am alive or not. That was the link to the family, to life.
Say my sister. Tell me it was your sister, because I don't. In saying
My sister married a person from Austria. He was born in Austria, but his family was able to flee to South America, Ecuador, and then he by some distant family got a visa to come to New York and to the United States, and that's where they met. And I came to visit my boyfriend to St. Louis. By the way, she never came to my wedding. She was very much against I should marry, according to her, an old man. If he would be rich, that's one thing, she said. But he is not rich. And we had a father. Why do you have to marry a father figure? Go figure. I always liked older men. And go figure, the thing with my children. My sons married older women. And my daughter, when she was working around Washington, she met somebody. And when she says, one night she called and she says, Mom, I think I'm gonna marry Joe. We love each other. He is just 3 years older than I am.
That's cute.
So life gives us many good things and many detours, as long as we can somehow come to the main road, then we are lucky.
Is there anything that you've left out that you didn't talk about with the kids? Something?
My children, I am lucky. They love me, and they are good to me, and they remember me, and we love each other. They remember my love to them, and they were much older. Somehow, my daughter was the one who first found out, because my daughter in the at Sheremet in the school, she said to my daughter, how come your mother was in a concentration camp and you were born in this country? And what country is she from? My parents came from Germany, and they met in Israel. And there is something missing with your mother, because she told them my father was born in Lithuania, and he was during the war with the United States Army in the service, and my mother comes from Czechoslovakia. And she came, Mom, I am 14 years old. Please tell me what happened to you during the war. Because Miri told me things which I don't know about. So I sat her down and I said, okay, now this is for you. Your brother is 4 years younger. He is just 10. He wouldn't understand as well as you. And some voice comes from the other room. Matli is my pet name, he is, to him, I am Matli, to my daughter is Mutsi, and to my son is Mama. Matli, I understand. I am not dumb, Matli. Mike told me something about his father. Can I be on it together with my sister? Because we love you. I told them briefly. And my daughter said, now I understand why you're so sensitive. And why we get sometimes by, not only with our father, because he always said I'm too strict, but with you too, because you love us so much. And I always says, I love you too much, but I am not going to raise you properly when I'm going to soft the lives, the daily life for us. We have to learn on our mistake, but also try not to repeat it. Now we understand why. I said, well, I am just dishing out how I was raised, and I was lucky with my parents. So I hope I can instill in you the pride of your family and me from whatever happened to me. And I taught them not to hate, and we have one God, whomever we pray to, and honor each other's differences, whether it's their being raised in other families or whether it's due to religion, and that hate is a destructive force, and try not to hate, please, and remember our God. Yeah, sometimes my youngest son, I am lucky, the oldest one lives in Kansas City. He has a PhD in sociology. My daughter is, well, you heard it, what I told the children, is in service. She takes EEGs and EKGs. And my youngest son has a master's degree from WashU in social work. And I am just lucky how much they love me and how much I was able to implement my feeling towards God and towards people. Because sometimes my son said, I don't have such a good day, Mom. And I said, I pray to God, He doesn't do anything. So I said, remember what I told you? I was raised not to question God, and that God works on a different schedule from ours.
Absolutely, that's for sure. There's
What can I say?
Right.
I am not a very religious Jew. I wanted my children to have the history of their people. We belong to Sheremet. And when they brought the books from Sunday school home, that's how I learned the history of my religion, of my people.
I want to go back and ask you one question. When you said you became a scribe, was that, I mean, that had to be a good thing.
A better thing. I get the same ration with food, but I wasn't.
When I became a scribe, when I was chosen to become a scribe.
Yeah, because I spoke fluent German, and because it didn't go against the.
Why don't you start it over again, Marci?
Okay. When you were picked to become a scribe, say when I was picked to become a scribe.
When I was picked to become a scribe, because I spoke a fluent German, and I didn't make them angry to speak Yiddish, which I didn't speak because my family didn't speak it. And it had the privilege not to be in the elements, out working, whatever the units were chosen to work in. And that I could sometimes during the day to go to that barrack where the little water was running and wash my face with little water instead of just cupping our hands in the roll call when it was raining. Because, yes, the rains were our showers. It was a little better. There were no showers. There was nothing. We girls lost their periods every month, and I was lucky. It took me 2 months to lose it, and I was doubly lucky I didn't flow too hard. My life is full of things I have to be thankful for to God. The circumstances through which I went through to be able to function and to raise a family, to be able to understand right from wrong, and to be able, and though I look at life differently, to be able to appreciate the life itself.
I think we've got everything.
Okay,
So I was saying, what did your parents? Did you go home from the university then? And what did
Yep,
they say?
I stayed at home. I met a nice person, and we married. He had a sporting goods store, and we had no children, thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here and talking to you. And things started brewing in Czechoslovakia, and we heard through the grapevine that Hitler it came to power, annexed Austria. There was Kristallnacht in Germany, which we didn't know about it. We had no media and very few newspapers. My father used to go sort of during the day to the back of the factory, the place where he used to take the trains from, and he was able to communicate with the people who worked underneath him, sometimes friends, and he brought news home to us that Europe is in an upheaval. Hitler is crazy, he is annexing everything, he went against Poland, killed all the educated people, the professors, and the doctors, and everybody and anybody politically disinclined with his teachings. And it wasn't enough to know, because whatever they did, I mean the German government under Hitler, it was so hush, and it wasn't much advertised in the one newspaper, and not everybody could buy it and have it, and no media. Jews were not allowed to have radios, and there were not many radios available. One time my father, before he was pensioned off, had a layover in Prague, and he brought a radio in pieces. He was very handy to put together. He also brought a gramophone, the one with the tube, his master's voice, which had to be wound up, and he brought beautiful records. That's the love I have for classical music. And it was in our house, in the long hallway from which they went to the bedrooms. And if he was gone lots of times, nights and days, and when he got a good report that we were good children and we minded our mother, so before we went to sleep, he put the machine, and we had music. It was, all the things are so jumbled in my subconscious mind. But I am grateful to God that the nights are not so hard, and I have no nightmares as much.